Hey, it's Adam, your internet chess coach. In today's video, we're going to look at game number 2 of Karpov versus Kamsky World Chess Championship match. Kamsky with the white pieces plays e4, pawn c6, the Caro, d4, and d5. As we go through the game, I'll pause at certain moments to give you the opportunity to find the moves that the players played in the game. d5, takes, and c4. We get what's called the Panov variation. Knight to f6, knight to c3, pawn to e6, and knight to f3. There's two main moves here, knight to f3 and pawn to c5. c5 can be a little bit more testing for players of the lower level because white is grabbing space on the queen side, and it's kind of not so easy to combat. You have this b6 idea undermining the pawns, but after pawn b4, a5 surprisingly doesn't work here. And I remember playing a classical match where this was played, and my opponent played queen a4 check, but actually knight a4 is quite strong here. In the game, knight f3, bishop to b4, captures, knight takes. Black takes with the knight in order to establish control over the d5 square and to give white an isolated pawn on d4. After knight takes d5, bishop d2 was played, knight to c6, bishop to d3, and bishop to e7. The idea of bishop to e7 is to vacate the b4 square, potentially for one of the knights. In addition to that, is bishop e7 prevents queen c2 in a lot of cases where knight to b4 would hit both the queen and the bishop. So an interesting retreating move. Kamsky as white castles and Karpov castles. We get queen to e2, knight to f6, knight to e4, and bishop d7. Rook to d1, rook to c8, rook to e1, and knight to d5. Knight comes back to c3, and knight comes back to f6. So it seems like with this move, Karpov is keeping great control over the center of the board with the knight, and is also tempting Gata to have to find something in this position. Are they going to get a repetition with knight to e4, knight to e5? Of course not. He's going to try to play for a win. So first Kamsky plays pawn to a3, and I really like this idea of a3 because it prevents this concept of knight b4, knight to d5. So pawn to a3, restrictive move, and here Karpov goes a little bit wrong according to modern engines with queen c7. A better move here was queen to b6, putting pressure on the pawn, and there's a lot of cases where the pawn is actually immune because the rook indirectly attacks the d4 square, and there might be some tactic with bishop takes h7 and rook takes on d4. So after queen c7, Kamsky plays bishop to g5. We get queen to a5, Karpov moving the queen a second time, trying to maybe take control over the d5 square, potentially queen coming to h5 to cover h7, and it's a more active move overall. But this does give white a slight advantage here, actually quite a marginal advantage. But it's not so clear how to make progress in the best way. There are some ideas that you might want to play, like knight e5, but then the pawn on d4 drops. You want to get your queen and bishop on this diagonal, but the knight covers e4. You could also have ideas like d5, but the knight is defending the bishop on e7. So in this position, pause the video here and try to find the move that Kamsky played. Okay, welcome back. Here Kamsky played pawn d5. And it's not so obvious exactly how you're going to get material back. So now that we know pawn d5 is the move, try to calculate out his idea. What if black takes? What would you play in that position? And pause the video if needed. Okay, after d5, Karpov takes. And we're going to see Kamsky's idea here. We have bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and bishop to h7, which I think Karpov missed. And the point is that after king takes, you're going to win the d5 pawn with a double attack. And there's not a real strong way to deal with this threat. You can't simply move the queen back to c7 because there's this move queen d3 check, picking up the bishop on d7. So after rook d5, Karpov plays a losing move here, trying to get a material imbalance, but better was the move queen b6, just giving back a little bit of material in order to say, okay, you still are up one, you're up one pawn, but I'm pretty solid, and you still have weaknesses of your own. He didn't want to go into a much kind of worse position, down a pawn, and thought he could complicate the position with bishop takes c3. But as you can see, it's not a good move here. So next moment of the game, it is white to play, and you have some options. You can take the queen, which is the most natural. You can take the bishop first, keeping the queen attacked and the bishop attacked. You can insert queen d3, keeping the rook protected, attacking the bishop, and then consider taking. What do you think is the best way for white to continue here? Pause the video here and try to find the best move. Okay, Karpov was hoping for counterplay, but Kamsky found the most precise way to continue. He captured the queen, winning material, and after bishop takes, you have this check winning the bishop, but first he inserted pawn b4, making sure that one piece is going to drop for black. Black played king g8, we take the bishop, and bishop g4. White is going to be up some material here. After a6, pawn takes, queen e4, bishop takes, and queen takes, white is up a queen, and we have 4 pawns versus 4 pawns, but a queen is stronger than a rook and knight. However, it's not going to be so easy to win this. Black is going to try to set up some construction with rook e6 and rook d6, and it's really important how white deals with this to convert it. So after the move to rook e8, white has a really big choice. Do you trade rooks in this position, or do you keep the rook on the board? Take a moment here, pause the video if needed, and try to come up with a reason to take the rook or not to take the rook. Okay, in this position, we should absolutely not trade the rook. If you take, it looks like you're winning material because the knight is hanging, but you cannot take the knight because you're getting back row checkmated, and if you can't take the knight, what's going to happen? Let's say you make some room for your king, like h3 or g3, then we have this move rook to e6. And while it appears like you're still up material, it's going to be extremely difficult to convert this. The pawn will go to a5, and the rook always defends the knight. On c6, maybe you can even jump forwards and jump back. If you win the pawn on a3 for sure, I think black will be able to create a fortress and hold this. Still very complicated though. So in this position, Kamsky plays rook to a1, which is the top move in the position. Quite a surprising move, but keeping the rook on the board. We get rook to e6, pawn to h3, rook to d8. The next 20 moves is going to be Kamsky trying to figure out what's the exact best way to convert this. Again, you don't want to trade a pair of rooks, but how do you exactly create some weakness in the king side? We get queen c3, rook d6, rook b1, rook d7, queen c4, a5, rook b5, rook d1 check, king h2, and rook d2 attacking the pawn. Rook to f5, rook to d4, queen c3, rook d6, rook c5, rook f6, rook c4. Karpov plays rook e6, rook c5, rook f6, queen e3, rook e6, queen g3, rook g6, queen b3, rook f6, queen b7, rook e6. Okay, can you find the way to make progress? So you kept your rook on the board, but it's really not so obvious how you're going to make progress. What is the right way to make progress here as white? Let's take a look at how Kamsky converted this. Queen c7, rook f6, and f4. The idea of f4, first off, you cannot take because the rook takes, but more importantly, after f5, black will not be able to establish a rook on e6, and that could be a very important holding mechanism for black. If you have to play rook h6, maybe the problem is after potentially g4, g5. You got to make some care to the king, maybe rook c2 first, but after g4, g5, the rook is going to be really misplaced. So Karpov avoids the advancement of the kingside pawns anyways and plays g6. But now the rook cannot utilize the g6 square, and Kamsky finds f5 here. The reason this move was played is to open up the black's king's position. We get pawn takes, and rook e6. Trading here is not playable because after queen takes, the knight is vacated, which means the pawns are going to fall. For example, knight to e5. We can even play queen to b8. And after king g7, queen takes a7. And if this pawn falls, white will easily win this game. Get rook to e6, rook to h5, rook to h6, and queen g3. King to f8 was played, rook to d5, rook to g6, queen to f2, moving to safety, rook f6, and queen b2. King e7, rook h5, rook to h6, rook to b5, rook to f6, queen to c3, and king to f8. Kamsky's massaging the position in a way where he's attempting to maneuver his pieces behind the enemy camp and deliver checkmate. He plays rook h5 first, and after rook h6, rook f5, rook g6, queen f3, rook g7, queen to f4, king to g8, and queen c7 invading and targeting the f7 pawn. This means that the rook on g7 must stay on defense, or black must find another way to defend the f7 pawn. After king f8, queen c8 was played, king e7, and rook d7. Invading on the d-file, we get king f6 and queen to h8, really adding a lot of pressure to black's pieces, making it very uncomfortable for Karpov. We get rook to e4, rook to h5, knight to e7, rook to h7, adding pressure to the rook on g7. Get knight to f5 and g4. Once the knight is kicked away, the rook will fall, and I believe after rook h7, Kamsky won the game, and Karpov resigned the game. So in this game, we have Kamsky getting on the scoreboard. The score is 1-1, and I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something from the way these guys played the Panov attack in the Caro-Kann. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.